Undercover CEO order Whopper burger, freezes when he hears two waitress say sauce comes from cheap mix. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the grease-stained windows of Burger Palace, painting the worn linoleum floor in patches of gold and amber. Elena Martinez wiped her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a faint streak of ketchup from her stained apron. The lunch rush had ended hours ago, leaving behind only the lingering smell of fried onions and the steady hum of the industrial freezer. She glanced at the clock mounted above the kitchen pass. 3:47 p.m. Still 3 hours and 13 minutes until her shift ended. Then she'd have exactly 23 minutes to catch the bus to her second job at the campus library. The math had become second nature to her, every minute calculated, every dollar counted, every sacrifice measured against her dream of nursing school. The bell above the entrance door chimed, its cheerful ding a stark contrast to Elena's exhausted sigh. She straightened her shoulders and painted on her practiced smile, the one that had served her well through countless double shifts and difficult customers. "Welcome to Burger Palace, where every bite is a royal experience," she recited, the corporate slogan feeling like sawdust in her mouth. The man who entered looked like he'd been driving for days. His flannel shirt was wrinkled, his jeans worn at the knees, and his baseball cap sat low over tired eyes. A trucker, Elena guessed, probably stopping for a quick meal before hitting the highway again. She'd served hundreds like him, hard-working men and women who lived their lives on the road, seeking nothing more than hot food and a moment's rest. "Just need something to eat, miss," the man said, his voice carrying a gravelly quality that spoke of long hours and hard work. He approached the counter with measured steps, his eyes scanning the menu board with the careful attention of someone who knew the value of every dollar. What Elena didn't know was that the tired-looking truck driver was actually Marcus Carter, CEO of the Burger Palace chain. 48 years old, worth over $200 million, and currently engaged in the most important undercover operation of his corporate career. Carter had built his empire from a single food truck in Detroit, watching it grow into a nationwide chain of over 800 restaurants. But lately, complaints had been trickling up through customer service reports. Complaints about quality, about taste, about the very essence of what had made Burger Palace special. The board of directors had suggested hiring an expensive consulting firm to investigate, but Carter had a different idea. He wanted to see his restaurants through the eyes of the people who mattered most, the customers and the employees who served them every day. "I'll have the Royal Whopper meal, please," Carter said, studying Elena's face. She looked young, maybe early 20s, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and endless worry. Her name tag read, Elena, in cheerful red letters, but her smile seemed genuine despite her obvious exhaustion. "Would you like to make that a large for just 50 cents more?" Elena asked, her tone professional but lacking the aggressive upselling he'd heard at other locations. "Sure, that sounds fine." Carter pulled out his wallet, noting how Elena's eyes briefly followed the movement. Not with greed, but with the careful attention of someone who counted every penny. He'd seen that look before, in his own mother's eyes when he was growing up in the projects of Detroit. As Elena rang up his order, Carter observed everything with the trained eye of someone who'd spent decades in the food service industry. The counter was clean but showed signs of wear. The menu boards were outdated, still advertising a seasonal item from 6 months ago. The floor tiles near the drink station were cracked, and the ceiling had a water stain that suggested a leak that had been ignored too long. But what struck him most was Elena herself. Despite her obvious fatigue, she moved with efficiency and care. When she handed him his receipt, she looked him in the eye and said, "Your order will be ready in just a few minutes. Please have a seat wherever you'd like." Carter chose a booth in the corner, positioning himself where he could observe both the kitchen and the dining room. The restaurant was nearly empty, just an elderly couple sharing a small fries and a mother trying to keep her toddler entertained while they waited for their food. Through the kitchen window, Carter watched the cook, a heavy-set man in his 50s who moved with the practiced motions of someone who'd been flipping burgers for decades. The man worked alone, handling orders with mechanical precision. Carter made mental notes. Understaffed, likely overworked, but maintaining food safety standards. "Order up!" the cook called, and Elena appeared at the pass. Carter watched as she arranged his meal on a red plastic tray, adding napkins and condiment packets with the same careful attention she'd shown at the register. When she brought the tray to his table, she set it down gently and asked, "Can I get you anything else? A refill on your drink or some extra sauce?" "This looks perfect, thank you," Carter replied, noting how her question about extra sauce seemed to carry a slight hesitation, as if she were following a script she wasn't entirely comfortable with. Elena nodded and turned to go, but Carter caught her attention. "Miss? Elena?" She turned back, wariness flickering in her eyes. In her experience, when customers called her back after getting their food, it usually meant complaints. "Yes, sir? You've been working here long?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "About 8 months," she answered carefully. "You like it?" Elena's practiced smile faltered for just a moment, and Carter saw something real flicker across her face: frustration, exhaustion, and something that might have been sadness. But the moment passed quickly, and the professional mask slipped back into place. "It's a good job," she said diplomatically. "It pays the bills." Carter nodded and let her go, but her words echoed in his mind as he unwrapped his burger. "It pays the bills. Not, I love working here. Or, it's a great company." Just the simple, honest truth of someone doing what they had to do to survive. He took his first bite and immediately noticed something was off. The Royal Whopper was supposed to be their signature item, featuring a special sauce that had been a closely guarded secret since the company's founding. His grandmother's recipe, passed down through 3 generations of Carters. But this sauce tasted different, thinner, with an artificial tang that made him wince. Carter took another bite, trying to convince himself he was imagining things. But there was no denying it. This wasn't the sauce that had made Burger Palace famous. This was something else entirely. He set the burger down and looked around the restaurant with new eyes. Elena was wiping down empty tables, her movements mechanical and tired. The elderly couple was leaving, the woman commenting quietly to her husband about how things just don't taste the same anymore. The mother was struggling to get her toddler to eat, eventually giving up and throwing most of the meal away. Carter's phone buzzed with a text from his assistant about quarterly profit reports showing record margins. Those margins suddenly felt heavy in his stomach, mixing with the artificial taste of whatever was masquerading as his grandmother's sauce. He pulled out a small notebook, the kind any trucker might carry to log his miles, and began to write. Time to start documenting everything he was seeing. Because if what he was tasting was happening here, in this small-town location, he had a sinking feeling it was happening everywhere. Elena passed by his table again, clearing the neighboring booth. This time, Carter really looked at her, not as a CEO studying an employee, but as one human being recognizing another. She was working hard, treating customers with respect, taking pride in doing her job well despite obviously difficult circumstances. Whatever was wrong with his company, Elena wasn't part of the problem. She was just another victim of it. Carter finished his meal in thoughtful silence, already planning his next moves. But as he prepared to leave, he couldn't shake the image of Elena's eyes when she'd said, "It pays the bills." There was a story there, a life being lived paycheck to paycheck, and he found himself hoping that whatever he discovered in his investigation, people like Elena wouldn't be the ones to suffer for it. He left a generous tip, $20 on a $12 meal, and walked out into the afternoon sun. Elena found the money a few minutes later and stared at it in surprise. $20 was groceries for 3 days, or a textbook for her anatomy class, or a small step closer to the dream that kept her going through these endless shifts. She looked toward the parking lot, but the kind truck driver was already gone, disappearing down the highway like so many others. She folded the bills carefully and slipped them into her pocket, allowing herself a moment of genuine gratitude before returning to her work. Neither of them knew that this chance encounter would change both of their lives forever. The next morning brought the usual pre-opening chaos to Burger Palace. Elena arrived 15 minutes early, as always, using the extra time to mentally prepare herself for another day of forced smiles and aching feet. The parking lot was empty except for a few employee cars and, she noticed with mild curiosity, the same beat-up pickup truck from yesterday. The kind trucker must be staying at the motel across the street. Inside, the familiar routine began. Elena tied her apron, checked her appearance in the employee restroom mirror, and tried to ignore the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. Last night, she'd stayed up until 2 a.m. working on her chemistry homework, knowing that every grade mattered if she wanted to get into the nursing program. The acceptance letter she needed felt both impossibly close and frustratingly far away. "Girl, you look like you've been hit by a truck," Jenna Rodriguez said, appearing beside Elena at the time clock. Jenna was 26, a single mother who'd been working at Burger Palace for 3 years. She had the kind of streetwise confidence that Elena admired but could never quite replicate. "Thanks for the pep talk," Elena muttered, punching in her employee number. "I'm serious. You're running yourself into the ground with all these double shifts." Elena shrugged. "Nursing school won't pay for itself." The morning rush hit them like a wave. Coffee-desperate commuters, parents grabbing breakfast for their kids, construction workers fueling up before long days. Elena fell into the familiar rhythm of taking orders, making change, and maintaining her professional demeanor while her mind wandered to her upcoming anatomy exam. It wasn't until 10:30 that the crowd finally thinned out. Elena's feet throbbed, and she could feel the beginning of one of her stress headaches creeping up the back of her neck. She glanced toward the corner booth and was surprised to see the same truck driver from yesterday, quietly nursing a cup of coffee and reading a newspaper. "Break time," announced Gary, the morning manager, a thin man in his 30s who seemed perpetually stressed about hitting corporate targets. Elena and Jenna grabbed bottles of water and collapsed into the employee break room, a cramped space behind the kitchen that smelled like industrial disinfectant and old coffee. "So, what's the deal with the trucker in booth 7? Jenna asked, unwrapping a granola bar. "He's been here 2 days in a row. Usually those guys are in and out. I don't know. Seems nice enough. Left a good tip yesterday. Maybe he likes what he sees," Jenna said with a knowing grin. "Don't be gross," Elena said, but she couldn't help smiling. It felt good to joke around, even for a few minutes. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in their own thoughts. Then Jenna spoke up, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. "Elena, can I ask you something? Have you noticed anything weird about the food lately?" The question caught Elena off guard. She'd been thinking the same thing for weeks but hadn't wanted to voice it. "What do you mean?" "I mean, customers have been complaining more. Little things. Food doesn't taste right, portions seem smaller. And yesterday, this lady came back and said her royal Whopper tasted nothing like it used to." Elena felt her stomach tighten. She'd been dreading this conversation, but maybe it was time to stop pretending everything was fine. "You want the truth?" Elena looked toward the break room door, making sure they were alone. "That special sauce everyone raves about. The one that's supposed to be this amazing secret recipe?" Jenna leaned forward. "Yeah? It's not special at all. It comes in these huge plastic containers from some supplier. Premixed artificial garbage. I've seen Gary mixing it with water to stretch it even further." The words tumbled out faster now, months of frustration finally finding voice. "And it's not just the sauce. The fresh-made burger patties? They're frozen, preformed things that taste like cardboard. The hand-cut fries? They come in bags from a factory. Everything we tell customers is a lie." What Elena didn't know was that Marcus Carter had returned to the restaurant specifically to continue his investigation. He'd positioned himself in the booth closest to the break room, ostensibly reading his newspaper while actually listening to every word the employees said during their breaks. When Elena's voice carried through the thin walls, talking about premixed sauce and frozen patties, Carter felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips as the full implications of what he was hearing sank in. "Are you serious?" Jenna's voice was equally shocked. "Dead serious. I've been here 8 months, Jenna. I've seen how everything works. We're basically lying to every customer who walks through that door. Carter set his cup down with shaking hands. The special sauce was his grandmother's recipe. He'd personally overseen its production for the first 10 years of the company's existence. It was supposed to be made fresh at a central facility and delivered weekly to each location. The idea that it had been replaced with some artificial mixture made his blood boil. But why would they do that? Jenna asked. Money, Elena said bitterly. Everything comes down to money. Cheaper ingredients, bigger profit margins. Corporate probably saves thousands of dollars per location, and they're counting on customers not noticing the difference. But people are noticing. Some are. But what are we supposed to do? Tell them the truth and lose our jobs? I need this job, Jenna. I can't afford to be the whistleblower who gets fired for honesty. Carter closed his eyes, feeling the weight of Elena's words. She was trapped, needing the job but disgusted by what she was being forced to do. How many other employees across his chain felt the same way? It just makes me sick, Elena continued. These people trust us. They come in here thinking they're getting quality food, and instead we're serving them processed garbage marked up 400%. I feel like I'm stealing from them every time I take their money. The genuine anguish in her voice hit Carter like a physical blow. This young woman, struggling to pay for school and working double shifts, cared more about the company's integrity than the executives who were supposed to be protecting it. He stood up quietly, leaving money on the table for his coffee. As he walked past the break room, he could hear Elena's voice one more time. I just wish I could do something about it. But what power do I have? I'm nobody. Carter stepped out into the morning sunshine, his mind racing. Elena thought she was nobody, but she was wrong. She had just given him the most valuable information of his entire career. Now he had to decide what to do with it. The evening shift at Burger Palace always moved differently than the morning rush. The pace was steadier but more unpredictable, families grabbing dinner, teenagers hanging out after school, night shift workers stopping by before starting their long hours. Elena had switched shifts with another employee to pick up extra hours, and by 7 p.m., her legs felt like concrete pillars. She was wiping down the counter for the third time that hour when the front door chimed. Elena looked up to see a man in an expensive suit striding through the entrance with the kind of confidence that immediately put her on edge. She recognized him from the corporate photos in the employee handbook, Regional Manager Derek Walsh. Walsh was in his early 40s, with perfectly styled hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He had a reputation among the staff for showing up unannounced, nitpicking everything from floor cleanliness to uniform compliance, and generally making everyone's life miserable during his visits. Good evening, team! Walsh announced loudly, his voice carrying that false enthusiasm that corporate types seem to learn in some special school. Just dropping by for a routine quality check. Gary, the evening manager, materialized from the office looking like he'd seen a ghost. Mr. Walsh! We weren't expecting you tonight. That's the point of surprise visits, Gary. Walsh's smile sharpened. I trust everything is running smoothly? Elena continued cleaning, trying to make herself invisible while Walsh conducted his inspection. She watched him check temperatures, examine food prep areas, and scrutinize every detail with the intensity of someone looking for problems to report. After 20 minutes of tense observation, Walsh gathered the evening staff, Elena, Jenna, Gary, and Mike the cook, near the front counter. I want to discuss something important, Walsh began, his tone shifting to something more serious. We've been getting some feedback from various locations about food quality. Some customers asking questions about our ingredients, our preparation methods. Elena felt her stomach drop. She glanced at Jenna, who was staring at the floor. Now I want to be absolutely clear about our company policy, Walsh continued, his eyes scanning each employee's face. When customers ask about our food, and I mean any questions about ingredients, preparation, sourcing, you stick to the script. Our Royal Whopper features our signature special sauce, made from a time-honored recipe. Our patties are fresh and flavorful. Our fries are prepared with care. The words felt like acid in Elena's mouth. She wanted to speak up, to challenge the obvious lies, but the memory of her tuition bills and her mother's medical expenses kept her silent. I cannot stress this enough. Walsh's voice grew harder. Customer confidence is everything in this business. One employee spreading rumors or negativity about our food quality can damage not just this location, but our entire brand reputation. He paused, letting the threat sink in. I trust one can count on all of you to be team players. To represent Burger Palace with the professionalism and loyalty that this company deserves. Elena bit her tongue so hard she tasted blood. The hypocrisy was overwhelming, talking about loyalty while the company was deceiving every customer who walked through the door. Any questions? Walsh asked, his smile returning but his eyes remaining cold. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Gary cleared his throat. No questions, Mr. Walsh. The team understands completely. Excellent. Walsh checked his watch. I'll be conducting similar meetings at other locations this week. Word travels fast in this business, and I want to make sure everyone is on the same page. As Walsh prepared to leave, he stopped directly in front of Elena. You're Elena Martinez, correct? 8 months with the company? Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Yes, sir. Gary tells me you're one of our hardest workers. College student, right? Yes, sir. Studying to be a nurse. That's admirable. Education is expensive these days. His smile widened, but there was something predatory in it. I'd hate to see anything jeopardize your future plans. Sometimes young people get idealistic, think they need to be crusaders for causes they don't fully understand. The message was crystal clear: keep your mouth shut, or lose everything. I understand completely, Mr. Walsh. Elena managed, her voice barely steady. I'm sure you do. You seem like a smart girl who understands which side her bread is buttered on. After Walsh left, the restaurant fell into an oppressive silence. Gary disappeared back into his office, and Mike returned to the kitchen without a word. Elena and Jenna finished their shift mechanically, both lost in their own thoughts. It wasn't until they were walking to the parking lot that Jenna finally spoke. That was about our conversation yesterday, wasn't it? Elena nodded miserably. Someone must have heard us. Do you think he knows it was us specifically? I don't know. Maybe. Did you see how he looked at me? Like he was filing away my face for future reference. They reached Jenna's car, an old Honda with a dented bumper and a child's car seat in the back. What are we going to do? Jenna asked. Elena stared up at the darkening sky, fighting back tears of frustration and fear. What can we do? I need this job, Jenna. Without it, I can't pay for school. I can't help my mom with her medication costs. I can't survive. But what about the customers? What about doing the right thing? The right thing? Elena laughed bitterly. The right thing is whatever keeps food on my table and a roof over my head. Walsh made that very clear. As Elena drove home to her tiny apartment, she felt the weight of compromise crushing down on her chest. She thought about all the customers she'd served with a smile, while knowing they were being cheated. She thought about the dreams that had sustained her through countless double shifts, dreams that now felt hostage to a system that demanded her silence. That night she sat at her kitchen table with her anatomy textbook open, but the words blurred together through her tears. She was trapped between her integrity and her survival, and for the first time since starting at Burger Palace, she wasn't sure which would win. In her despair, she didn't notice the pickup truck parked across the street, or the figure inside taking notes by the dim light of a cell phone. Carter had witnessed Walsh's visit from the parking lot, and every word of the regional manager's threats had been recorded. Elena thought she was alone in her struggle, but she was wrong. Help was coming from the most unexpected source. Marcus Carter had barely slept after witnessing Walsh's intimidation tactics. By 6 a.m., he was already on the highway, driving toward the next Burger Palace location 40 miles east. His disguise remained the same: worn jeans, flannel shirt, and the kind of tired expression that made him invisible to corporate eyes. The Riverside location looked different from Elena's restaurant. Newer paint, better lighting, more customers. But as Carter ordered his usual Royal Whopper and found a corner booth, the same sick feeling settled in his stomach when he tasted that artificial sauce. He spent 3 hours there, watching and listening. The employees seemed more guarded, more rehearsed in their responses. When an elderly customer asked about ingredients due to allergies, the teenage cashier recited the corporate script word for word, her eyes never leaving the register screen. "Fresh ingredients, made with care, following our traditional recipes," she said mechanically. Carter saw the customer's confused expression as she bit into her burger. The woman took 2 more bites, then quietly pushed the tray away, leaving most of the meal untouched. By noon, Carter was at the 3rd location in Millfield, a struggling town where the Burger Palace sat between a shuttered factory and a check-cashing store. Here, the deception felt even more cruel. Families stretching their dollars, workers grabbing quick lunches between shifts, all being sold substandard food at premium prices. The manager at this location was a young woman named Sandra, probably in her mid-20s, who moved with the frantic energy of someone trying to keep a sinking ship afloat. Carter watched her handle a complaint from a construction worker who insisted his Royal Whopper tasted like plastic. "I'm so sorry, sir," Sandra said, forcing brightness into her voice. "Let me get you a fresh one made with extra care." But Carter knew the replacement would taste exactly the same. The problem wasn't in the preparation, it was in the ingredients themselves. After leaving Millfield, Carter parked behind a gas station and made a series of phone calls. His assistant patched him through to the head of procurement, then to quality control, then to the supplier relations department. Each conversation revealed another piece of the puzzle. "When did we switch sauce suppliers?" he asked the procurement director, keeping his voice casual. "About 18 months ago, sir. Significant cost savings. The regional VPs pushed hard for the change. And the quality testing? All approved by the regional management team. They assured us the taste profile was identical." Carter's jaw clenched. Regional management. That meant Walsh and his counterparts in other territories were not just aware of the switch, they had orchestrated it. What about the fresh patty program? Phased out gradually over the past year. Again, substantial cost savings. The regions reported no customer complaints. No complaints because employees like Elena were being threatened into silence. Carter spent the afternoon in his hotel room, laptop open, diving deep into financial records he could access remotely. What he found made his blood boil. The ingredient cost savings weren't going back into the restaurants or being passed on to customers. Instead, the regional VPs had structured the changes to maximize their own performance bonuses. Walsh alone had received over $200,000 in cost efficiency bonuses in the past year. Money earned by serving artificial garbage to working families who trusted the Burger Palace name. His phone rang. It was his CFO, calling about the quarterly board meeting next week. "Marcus, the regional performance numbers look fantastic. Walsh and his team have exceeded profit margin targets by 12%. Have they now?" Carter said grimly. "The board is going to love these results. Should we highlight the regional cost management initiatives in your presentation? Let me think about that." After hanging up, Carter stared at the procurement files on his screen. This wasn't just about one bad regional manager. This was systematic fraud, affecting hundreds of thousands of customers across multiple states. His thoughts drifted to Elena, her exhausted eyes, her genuine care for the customers she served, her terror when Walsh had threatened her future. She was just one employee in one restaurant, but she represented everything that was supposed to matter about his company. Carter closed his laptop and grabbed his truck keys. It was time to return to Elena's location. He needed to understand the full scope of what was happening, and something told him she was the key to getting to the truth. As he drove back toward town, passing billboards advertising Burger Palace, where quality meets tradition, Carter felt a familiar fire building in his chest. It was the same anger that had driven him to build his first food truck, the same determination that had carried him through countless 18-hour days in those early years. Someone was destroying everything he built, and they were doing it by exploiting people like Elena, honest workers who deserve better than to be trapped between survival and integrity. When he pulled into the Burger Palace parking lot that evening, Carter saw Elena through the window, taking an order from a family with 3 young children. She was smiling, being patient with the kids as they changed their minds about what they wanted. She genuinely cared about doing her job well, even knowing the food she was serving didn't live up to the promises being made. Elena noticed the familiar pickup truck through the window and felt an unexpected flutter of relief. The kind trucker was back. In the chaos of the past few days, his quiet presence had become something of a comfort. He seemed different from other customers, more observant, more thoughtful. And after Walsh's visit, she found herself craving any interaction that felt genuine. What Elena didn't know was that the man she'd begun to think of as a friendly regular was actually planning to turn her world upside down. Carter was done watching from the sidelines. It was time to take action. But first, he needed Elena to trust him. Because what he was about to ask of her would require more courage than either of them realized. Elena noticed the familiar pickup truck through the window and felt an unexpected flutter of relief. The kind trucker was back. In the chaos of the past few days, his quiet presence had become something of a comfort. He seemed different from other customers, more observant, more thoughtful. And after Walsh's visit, she found herself craving any interaction that felt genuine. What Elena didn't know was that the man she'd begun to think of as a friendly regular was actually planning to turn her world upside down. Carter was done watching from the sidelines. It was time to take action. But first, he needed Elena to trust him. Because what he was about to ask of her would require more courage than either of them realized. 3 days after Walsh's visit, paranoia had settled over Burger Palace like a toxic fog. Elena noticed it in the way conversations stopped when managers walked by, in the sideways glances between coworkers, in the nervous energy that made everyone jump at sudden sounds. She was restocking napkin dispensers during the afternoon lull when Jenna approached, looking over her shoulder like she expected corporate spies to materialize from the walls. "Elena, we need to talk," Jenna whispered, her voice tight with anxiety. They slipped into the supply closet, the cramped space barely big enough for both of them among the boxes of cups and cleaning supplies. "What's wrong?" Elena asked, though she could already guess. "I think someone complained," Jenna said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "About the sauce, about the quality issues. Gary's been acting weird all morning, making calls, checking security cameras." Elena's blood ran cold. "What kind of calls?" "I heard him talking to someone about investigating the source of negative feedback, and get this, he was asking about our break room conversations from last week." The walls of the tiny closet seemed to close in around Elena. "You think they know it was us?" "I don't know, but yesterday Mike mentioned that someone from corporate called asking about employee attitudes. They wanted to know if anyone had been spreading negativity about the food quality." Elena leaned against the metal shelving, feeling dizzy. "This is bad, Jenna. Really bad. It gets worse," Jenna continued, glancing at the door. "Sarah from the morning shift? She said Walsh has been calling other locations, asking managers to identify any problem employees who might be undermining company messaging." The implication hit Elena like a physical blow. Walsh wasn't just threatening employees at this location. He was building some kind of blacklist across the entire region. "I have a kid to think about," Jenna said, her voice cracking. "I can't lose this job. My ex doesn't pay child support, and my mom's disability barely covers her medications. I need the insurance, Elena. I need the steady paycheck." Elena understood completely. Her own financial situation was just as desperate. One missed paycheck could mean dropping out of school, losing her apartment, watching her dreams crumble. "So what do we do?" Elena asked. "We keep our heads down. We say nothing. We pretend everything is fine and hope this blows over." But even as she said it, Jenna's expression showed how much the compromise was costing her. Both women had grown up believing that honesty mattered, that doing the right thing was worth the risk. Now they were being forced to choose between their principles and their survival. When they emerged from the supply closet, Elena noticed Gary watching them from behind the front counter. His expression was unreadable, but there was something calculating in his eyes that made her skin crawl. The afternoon dragged on with agonizing slowness. Every time the phone rang, Elena tensed, expecting it to be Walsh or someone from corporate. Every customer complaint, and there were several about food quality, felt like another nail in her coffin. Around 4 p.m., Gary called Elena into his office. The small room smelled like burnt coffee and stressed sweat. Financial reports and corporate memos covered every surface, and a framed photo of the regional management team hung behind his desk like a shrine to corporate loyalty. "Close the door," Gary said without looking up from his computer. Elena's hands shook as she turned the door handle. "Is everything okay?" "That depends on you." Gary finally looked at her, his expression serious. "I've been getting some interesting phone calls from the regional office." Elena's mouth went dry. "Oh? It seems there have been some concerns raised about employee attitudes at this location. Questions about whether certain staff members understand the importance of brand loyalty." The words were carefully chosen, neutral on the surface but loaded with threat. "I want you to know, Elena, that I value you as an employee. You're reliable, you show up on time, customers like you." Gary paused, letting the compliment sink in before delivering the blow. "But reliability means more than just showing up. It means being a team player. It means supporting the company that signs your paychecks." Elena forced herself to meet his eyes. "I understand." "Do you? Because from what I'm hearing, some employees might have the wrong impression about our food quality. They might be sharing concerns that could damage customer confidence." "I would never." Gary held up a hand to stop her. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just making sure we're on the same page. Because if there were problems with employee messaging, corporate would want to address them quickly and decisively. The threat was clear: conform or be destroyed." "I understand completely." Elena managed. "Good. I'd hate to see a promising young woman like yourself get caught up in something that could hurt her future. College is expensive, and good jobs are hard to find." As Elena returned to the dining room, her legs felt like water. She caught Jenna's eye across the restaurant and saw her own fear reflected there. They were trapped, silenced by their own desperation. But what neither of them noticed was the man in the corner booth, the tired-looking trucker who'd been nursing the same coffee for 2 hours. Carter had positioned himself where he could see Gary's office, and Elena's pale, shaken expression when she emerged told him everything he needed to know. The intimidation was escalating. Walsh and his allies were tightening the screws, making sure their fraud remained buried under layers of fear and economic coercion. Carter watched Elena return to her work, her movements mechanical and defeated. She looked like someone who just watched her dreams get crushed under the weight of corporate power. It was time to even the odds. That evening, as Elena walked to her car in the darkening parking lot, Carter made his decision. Tomorrow, he would approach her. Not as a customer, not as an observer, but as someone who might be able to help. He just hoped she'd have the courage to trust him when the time came. Elena's shift ended at 9 p.m., but she lingered in the employee break room, staring at her anatomy textbook without really seeing the words. The diagram of the human heart blurred as tears threatened to spill over. Everything she'd worked for felt like it was slipping away, and she didn't know how to stop it. The restaurant had emptied out, with only Gary finishing his closing duties and Mike cleaning the kitchen. Elena finally gathered her things and walked toward the employee exit, her footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. She pushed through the back door into the cool night air and nearly jumped out of her skin when she saw a figure leaning against the dumpster. "Easy there," said a familiar voice. "Didn't mean to startle you." It was the trucker, the kind man who'd been coming in regularly over the past week. But something was different about him tonight. He stood straighter, and his eyes held an intensity she hadn't noticed before. "You're working late," Elena said cautiously, clutching her car keys like a weapon. "Actually, I was waiting for you," Carter said, his voice gentle but serious. "I think we need to talk." Every alarm bell in Elena's head started ringing. Strange men waiting for her in parking lots never led to good conversations. "I don't think that's appropriate." I should go. Elena, wait. Carter took a step forward, then stopped when he saw her tense. I know what's been happening in there. I know about Walsh's visit, about the threats, about how scared you are. Elena's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you're talking about. The sauce, Carter said quietly. The premixed, artificial sauce that's supposed to be a family recipe. The frozen patties that are supposed to be fresh. The lies you're forced to tell customers every day. Elena looked around the empty parking lot, paranoia flooding her system. Are you recording this? Are you working for corporate? No, Carter said firmly. I'm working against them. I can't talk about this. I need this job. I know you do. I know you're saving for nursing school. I know your mother has medical expenses. I know you're working double shifts to make ends meet. How do you know all that? Elena's voice rose in panic. Carter raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. Because I've been listening. Not spying, not investigating you personally. But listening to how you talk about your life, watching how hard you work, seeing how much you care about doing right by people. Elena backed toward her car. This is crazy. I don't know who you are or what you want, but my name is Marcus Carter, he said, his voice cutting through her panic. And I want to help you. Elena stopped moving. Something in his tone, in the way he said his name, made her pause. Carter? Why does that sound familiar? Because it's the name on the Burger Palace corporate structure. Carter Holdings. Carter Family Restaurants. Elena stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. That's impossible. The Carter family owns this company. They're millionaires. They don't drive beat-up trucks and eat in small-town restaurants. You're right about the millionaire part, Carter said with a slight smile. Wrong about the rest. You're lying. But even as she said it, Elena was remembering things. The way he observed everything. His questions about how long she'd worked there. The expensive-looking watch he thought he kept hidden under his flannel sleeve. The tip that was too generous for a truck driver's budget. I'm not lying, Elena. I'm the CEO of this company, and I've been going undercover to find out why our food quality has gone to hell. You gave me the answer. Elena leaned against her car, feeling dizzy. This can't be real. It's real. And I need your help to fix it. My help? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm nobody. I'm a waitress who can't even speak up without losing her job. You're not nobody, Carter said fiercely. You're the person who cared enough about our customers to tell the truth, even when it was dangerous. You're the person who's been carrying the weight of this company's integrity on your shoulders while the people who should be protecting it were busy lining their own pockets. Elena stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. Prove it. Carter pulled out his wallet and showed her his driver's license. Marcus Carter, with an address in a wealthy suburb she'd only driven through once. Then he showed her a corporate credit card, and finally a business card with the Burger Palace logo and CEO printed in elegant letters. Oh my God! Elena whispered. You're really him. I'm really him. And I'm really angry about what's been done to this company. To you. To every customer who's been cheated. Elena's legs gave out, and she slid down the side of her car until she was sitting on the asphalt. Walsh is going to fire me. Gary's already suspicious. If anyone finds out I talked to you, they're not going to fire you, Carter said, crouching down to her level. They're the ones who are going to be fired. All of them. Walsh, the corrupt suppliers, anyone who participated in this fraud. You don't understand, Elena said, tears flowing freely now. I can't lose this job. I can't start over. I'm so close to having enough money for school, and if I get blacklisted. Elena, look at me. Carter's voice was gentle but commanding. You're not going to lose anything. I'm going to make sure of that. But I need you to help me document everything you know. Every detail about the ingredient switches, the threats, the cover-ups. I need someone on the inside who can help me build a case that will stick. Elena wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Why should I trust you? For all I know, this could be some elaborate test. Maybe Walsh sent you to see if I'd break. Because, Carter said, standing and offering her his hand, tomorrow morning, I'm going to walk into that restaurant and reveal exactly who I am. I'm going to confront Walsh and Gary and everyone else involved in this mess. And when I do, I want you standing beside me. Elena looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face. For the first time in weeks, she saw something she'd almost forgotten existed: hope. What happens to me after? Even if you fire Walsh, there will be other managers, other threats. Then you won't have to worry about managers anymore, Carter said. Because you'll be working directly for me. Corporate training program, full scholarship for nursing school, guaranteed job security. The works. Elena felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening after being locked for too long. She took his hand and let him help her to her feet. Are you sure about this? She asked. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Carter said. The question is, are you ready to help me save this company? Elena thought about all the customers she'd served with fake smiles and real guilt. She thought about her dreams of becoming a nurse, of helping people, of making a difference. She thought about Walsh's threats and Gary's intimidation and the crushing weight of choosing between survival and integrity. Yes, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. I'm ready. Carter smiled, and for the first time since this whole mess started, Elena felt like maybe everything was going to be okay. 1 week later, the Burger Palace dining room buzzed with nervous energy as employees filed in for what Gary had announced as a mandatory all-hands meeting. Elena sat in the back row, her palms sweating despite the air conditioning. She'd barely slept in the past 7 days, alternating between excitement and terror about what was coming. Carter had spent the week building his case with Elena's help. She'd provided detailed documentation of ingredient changes, supplier switches, and management threats. Together, they'd gathered evidence that painted a damning picture of systematic fraud across multiple locations. I still can't believe this is really happening, Jenna whispered, sliding into the seat next to Elena. Corporate meetings never mean good news. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Around them, 24 employees chatted nervously. Day shift workers who'd come in early, night shift staff who'd stayed late, kitchen crews still wearing their aprons. Everyone looked tired and worried, expecting another round of policy changes or productivity demands. Gary stood at the front of the room, checking his watch with the kind of agitation that suggested he didn't know what this meeting was about either. He'd received the directive from regional management with instructions to gather all staff but no explanation of the agenda. Where's Mr. Walsh? Asked Sandra, the assistant manager who'd transferred from the Millfield location the previous month. He should be here any minute, Gary replied, though his expression suggested he was wondering the same thing. The front door chimed, and Elena's heart nearly stopped. Walsh strode in wearing his usual expensive suit and predatory smile, followed by 2 people Elena didn't recognize, a severe-looking woman with a briefcase and a younger man with a laptop bag. Good morning, team, Walsh announced, his voice carrying that familiar false enthusiasm. Thank you all for gathering today. We have some important company updates to share. Elena forced herself to breathe normally. Carter had promised he would be here, but she still didn't see him anywhere. Doubt crept into her mind like poison. What if this was all an elaborate setup? What if Carter had been lying about everything? Walsh positioned himself at the front of the room like he owned it. First, I want to commend you all on your dedication to Burger Palace values. Your loyalty and discretion have not gone unnoticed by corporate leadership. The emphasis on discretion made Elena's skin crawl. Even now, Walsh was reinforcing his threats. Today, we're implementing some new efficiency protocols that will help us maintain our competitive edge, Walsh continued. These changes require absolute adherence to company messaging. Any deviation from approved scripts or unauthorized discussions about operational procedures will result in immediate termination. Elena felt Jenna tense beside her. Around the room, employees shifted uncomfortably. The threats were getting more explicit. Now I'd like to introduce our new regional compliance officer, Walsh said, gesturing to the severe woman. Ms. Henderson will be conducting individual interviews with all staff to ensure everyone understands their responsibilities. Elena's blood turned to ice. Individual interviews. They were going to interrogate everyone, trying to identify who had been spreading negativity about the company. Any questions before we begin? Walsh asked, his smile sharp as a blade. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then the front door chimed again. Elena looked up and felt her world shift. A man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit walked through the entrance, his presence commanding immediate attention. It was Carter, but transformed. Gone was the tired trucker persona. In its place stood a figure of undeniable authority and power. The change in the room was electric. Gary's face went white. Walsh's confident smile flickered and died. The woman with the briefcase looked confused, clearly not expecting another participant in this meeting. "I'm sorry I'm late," Carter said, his voice carrying easily across the stunned silence. "Traffic was worse than expected." Elena watched Walsh's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and growing horror as he processed what he was seeing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter continued, walking to the front of the room with measured steps. "My name is Marcus Carter. I'm the CEO of Burger Palace." The room erupted in gasps and whispered conversations. Elena saw Jenna's jaw drop, watched Gary sink into a chair like his legs had given out, observed kitchen staff pointing and whispering to each other in disbelief. But Elena kept her eyes on Walsh. The regional manager looked like he'd seen a ghost, a very angry, very powerful ghost who held his career in its hands. "Mr. Walsh," Carter said, his voice deadly calm. "I believe you were just explaining some new protocols to our team?" Walsh's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Mr. Carter, we weren't expecting. This is highly irregular." "What's irregular?" Carter said, his voice growing harder. "Is discovering that our signature sauce has been replaced with artificial garbage. What's irregular is learning that employees are being threatened for caring about food quality. What's irregular is finding out that customer trust is being betrayed for the sake of executive bonuses." Elena felt electricity run through her body. This was really happening. The man she'd served coffee to dozens of times was dismantling Walsh's empire of lies in front of everyone. "Sir, I think there's been some misunderstanding," Walsh stammered. "Our quality standards have always been." "Have they?" Carter pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Walsh's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "Customer confidence is everything in this business. One employee spreading rumors or negativity about our food quality can damage our entire brand reputation." The recording continued, playing Walsh's threats about sticking to scripts and maintaining loyalty. Elena watched the regional manager's face drain of all color as his own words condemned him. "That recording was made right here, in this restaurant, 1 week ago," Carter said. "Right after you intimidated my employees for telling the truth about the substandard ingredients you've been forcing them to serve." Elena felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Carter had kept his promise. He was here, he was fighting for them, and Walsh's reign of terror was over. "Mr. Walsh," Carter continued, his voice like judgment itself, "you're fired. Security will escort you from the premises. Ms. Henderson, I assume you're here as his accomplice?" The severe woman was already backing toward the door. "I was just following orders, sir. I had no knowledge of any irregularities." "Then I suggest you update your resume," Carter said coldly. As Walsh was led away, his face a mask of shock and defeat, Carter turned to address the assembled employees. His expression softened as he looked at Elena, giving her the slightest nod of acknowledgement. "I owe all of you an apology," he said. "This company failed you. I failed you. But that ends today." The silence in the room was deafening as Carter's words sank in. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of every employee's shocked attention focused on the man who had just turned their world upside down. "For the past week, I've been investigating reports of quality issues across our chain," Carter continued, his voice carrying a mixture of anger and genuine remorse. "What I found was worse than I could have imagined. Not just substandard ingredients, but a systematic campaign of intimidation designed to silence the very people who tried to protect our customers. Gary, still pale as a sheet, raised a trembling hand. Sir, I want you to know that I was just following regional directives. Mr. Walsh assured us these changes were approved by corporate. Carter's gaze fixed on the manager with laser intensity. Gary, in the past month, how many employees have you threatened for questioning food quality? Gary's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to speak. I was protecting the brand, sir. Mr. Walsh said that negative employee attitudes could damage customer confidence. By silencing people who cared enough to tell the truth? Carter's voice carried deep disappointment. Gary, you're suspended pending a full investigation. I'll be conducting exit interviews with every employee you've managed in the past year. Elena watched Gary crumble, realizing that his willingness to be Walsh's enforcer had cost him everything. She felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and pity. Gary wasn't evil like Walsh, just weak and scared. But weakness in leadership positions could be just as dangerous as malice. Carter turned his attention back to the group. Now, let me be clear about what's going to happen next. First, every location in this chain will return to our original recipes within the next 2 weeks. Real ingredients, real quality, the standards this company was built on. A murmur of approval rippled through the employees. Elena saw kitchen staff nodding with what looked like relief. Second, there will be no retaliation against anyone who spoke up about these issues. None. Anyone who tries to punish employees for telling the truth will answer directly to me. Carter paused, scanning the faces in front of him. When his eyes met Elena's, she saw something that made her chest tight with emotion, respect, gratitude, and perhaps the beginning of trust. Finally, Carter said, this company owes a debt to those who had the courage to speak truth to power, even when it put their livelihoods at risk. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Elena Martinez, would you please come forward? Elena's legs felt like jelly as she stood up. Every eye in the room followed her as she made her way to the front, Jenna squeezing her hand encouragingly as she passed. Elena, Carter said, his voice warm with genuine admiration. You've been working here for 8 months, saving money for nursing school while supporting your family. You've maintained your integrity in the face of threats and intimidation. You've cared more about our customers' trust than your own safety. Elena felt tears welling up again, but this time they were tears of hope rather than despair. This envelope contains a full scholarship to the nursing program of your choice, plus a living stipend for the duration of your studies. Carter continued. It also includes a guaranteed position in our new corporate ethics program when you graduate, if you're interested. Elena's hands shook as she accepted the envelope. Mr. Carter, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Carter replied. You already did the hard part. You told the truth when it mattered. Elena looked out at her coworkers, seeing a mixture of amazement, joy, and perhaps a little envy on their faces. But mostly she saw hope. If Elena could be rewarded for doing the right thing, maybe there was a future where integrity mattered more than compliance. Sir, called out Mike from the kitchen crew. What about the rest of us? Are we going to be okay? Carter nodded seriously. Every employee at this location will receive a bonus equal to 1 month's pay as an apology for what you've endured. Additionally, we're implementing an anonymous reporting system so that if anything like this ever happens again, you can reach me directly. Elena watched the transformation ripple through the room. Shoulders straightened, smiles appeared, and for the first time in months, people looked genuinely hopeful about coming to work. I know I can't undo the stress and fear you've experienced, Carter said. But I can promise you this, Burger Palace will be a company you can be proud to work for again. We're going to rebuild this business on the foundation it should have always had, respect for our employees, honesty with our customers, and food that lives up to our promises. As the meeting broke up, employees clustered around Carter, asking questions, sharing their own stories of frustration and fear under Walsh's regime. Elena hung back, still processing everything that had happened. Elena, Carter approached her as the crowd thinned out. I want you to know that everything I promised in that parking lot I meant. But more than that, I want to thank you. You saved this company, even though you had every reason to stay silent. Elena looked at this man who had turned her life upside down in the best possible way. I didn't do anything special. I just did what felt right. That's exactly what made it special, Carter said with a smile. In a world where doing what feels right can cost you everything, choosing integrity anyway is the rarest kind of courage. As Elena walked out of the restaurant that day, scholarship envelope in her hand and a future full of possibilities stretching ahead of her, she realized that sometimes the most unexpected connections could change everything. A tired truck driver and an overworked waitress had found a way to restore hope to an entire company. And for the first time in months, Elena Martinez believed that dreams really could come true. #the sauce of truth.